Can't hear him. Oh,
Being a good tenant, I would.
okay. Councilmember Tagent, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you so much.
There's something awesome.
All right, let's go ahead and kick this meeting off. It's December 10th, 2024 at 6 o'clock, and this is going to be a city council meeting of the Lake Stevens City Council. We are down at the mill. We are live and we are also online. This meeting will be later published on our YouTube channel. And with that, I would ask all to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America, to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, great. Clerk Chellan, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peters Hagan,
Present.
Councilmember Donahue online,
Present.
Councilmember Shipman,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad,
Present.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
and Councilmember Tagent online.
Present.
Great. And Council President, can we get an approval of the agenda?
Certainly. Good evening, council members. I'd like to add to the agenda tonight 11B, make an amendment to this. City Clerk Chellan would like to talk about the upcoming agenda for next week's meeting, since we're kind of at the end of the year wrapping things up. So any other additions, deletions to the agenda?
Move to approve with that addition.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You have an agenda.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's move forward with it and we'll do guest business. Let's start with Clerk Chellan.
All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. I'm really excited when I had a vision of this Municipal Services Division, and this completes it with our new records management specialist. So this is Brandon Tallman. He is joining us from Corey Electronics, where he was an IT systems engineer. Prior to that, he worked in IT at Everett Public Schools and Providence Hospital in the permitting and engineering for a telecommunications company. Brandon grew up in Arlington and frequently played baseball in Lake Stevens at the community park, Lake Stevens High School fields, and the Lockshoy Field. He now lives in Marysville with his wife and 2 kids and is looking to move to Lake Stevens when he can. This position is highly important to him as he gets to use his previous experience and schooling to serve the public and support his community. I'm really excited to have him on the team and help us get our records organized. Welcome, Brandon.
Welcome. Welcome.
Welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon.
Good to see you again, Brad.
All right, let's follow that up by Sarah.
All right, I would like to introduce Robert Charette. He joined the Parks Department as a parks maintenance worker 7 weeks ago. He grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and spent his career working in conservation and landscaping across Michigan, Tennessee, and Idaho. His professional background includes 3 years of experience in parks, 10 years of experience in landscaping, and 6 years in irrigation. He moved to Lake Stevens area in October for this job with his wife, 2 dogs, and a cat. Outside of work, he enjoys various outdoor activities such as camping, hiking, trail running, and unique interest in participating in 100-mile races. I couldn't compete with him. I am passionate about he is passionate about parks and is thrilled to be part of this community. Welcome, Rob.
Welcome.
Is there a bear chasing you or something? No? Get out of here. Welcome.
All right.
All right, great. All right, let's move to citizens' comments, and I'll first divert, is there anybody online who wishes to provide citizens' comments?
Not seeing anybody. Again, as the mayor said, if you'd like to speak during citizen comment, this would be the time to raise your digital hand if you're on Zoom. No.
Okay, seeing none, do we have anybody I don't have any green sheets, so I don't know. Do we have both of, ladies first, you're up.
Hi, I'm Andrea Wright at 10815 29th Street Northeast. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and city staff. I'm a commissioner for the Lake Stevens Sewer District, and I'm speaking to provide feedback regarding the potential sewer utility tax discussion from the November 26th City Council meeting. I was deeply disappointed to hear council members and staff attempt to justify the proposed 6% utility tax. If the city is seeking to generate additional revenue, I strongly recommend reconsidering the ongoing and unnecessary lawsuit with the sewer district. Settling this dispute could open up your much-needed untapped resources for funding. To clarify, the sewer district is not a revenue-generating utility. Any tax imposed on the district will inevitably be passed along to the citizens. No public utility can absorb such a tax without transferring the burden to the taxpayers. As a result, this tax will lead to a 6.38% increase for all customers, including our most vulnerable. Regarding Councilman Tangent's comments about the sewer district's debt reduction, I would like to emphasize that paying down debt is a hallmark of a fiscally responsible public entity. The sewer district's consistent payments into the rate stabilization fund help keep rates stable for 2.5 additional years, providing long-term relief for our ratepayers. Lastly, I'd like to address the issue of street and utility maintenance. The streets are the city's responsibility. While the sewer district maintains the sewer manholes, the areas around them fall under the city's jurisdiction. Additionally, the failing trenching referred by Director Halverson during the November 26th meeting is also a city responsibility. It's also worth noting that in the last 4 years of the utility committee meetings, the city has never added these agenda topics of manhole maintenance or street improvement to our agendas. What is the point of the meeting then? It is clear that the utility tax will be voted on unanimously by the council tonight. However, as a concerned citizen, I would appreciate an honest explanation of the actual need for these funds rather than a carefully crafted narrative that places blame on another public entity for the imposition of this tax.
Thank you, Andrea.
Sorry.
And Nathan, go ahead.
All right, Nathan Packard, 117th Drive Southeast. So I just first wanted to start previous comments that I made last time. I did not want to suggest that the city has an excess of waste or inefficiency. I made a comment about that, at how the county has its own challenges. So I clearly did not want to suggest that we have the same problems here in our city as I'm seeing in other places federally or at the county or state. So I think the city is doing a great job and did not want to suggest anything other than that. Having said that, I do want to reiterate some of the things that I shared last week and follow up on some of the commentary that I had heard last time as well. First off, as Director Wright said, I am struggling with the rationale a little bit. As I stated last time, I struggled to see that there was a clearly defined need, and then this tax is imposed to go address the need. It does appear that it's an opportunity to go find funds, and then we've then said, hey, these are things we could do with the money. There's a comment in the staff report again this week about essential services, and I'm struggling to see how some of those things are essential, and if they are essential, how did we pay for them before, and why is this different, and why do we feel like we need additional money now? And I will admit, I don't understand the details or the plans in terms of the sewer expansions and things like that. I would simply ask then that in this meeting today that there's some dialogue around that to educate the citizens to help us understand how long those items have been on your wish list, et cetera, to help, again, provide justification for the need as opposed to just an opportunity to go do it because we can. It's $1.4 million, I think, is the projection per year, right, that you're pulling from the citizens. That's not a small amount of money, and I think we owe the citizens some level of transparency for why we're doing that. Second, there was a lot of commentary last time about annual increases and doing a full 6% all up front versus say 3% and then 6% after that. I get that there can be some sticker shock from people being frustrated with having an annual raise 2 years in a row. I think if you communicated to them that, hey, we're trying to save you money in the long haul, right? I don't know anybody who would rather say, oh yeah, I'd rather pay $70 every year versus, oh, I'd be happy to pay 35 now and then 70 more next time. So maybe the sewer district gets a bunch of angry calls saying, hey, you raised my taxes twice in a row. But as a consumer, as the citizen, I would be happy to save that money as long as I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
We have a hand up now digitally. Can we bring them in?
Yeah, is there anybody else in the audience? Okay, we'll take the digital hand.
Russell, Joe, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you've got 3 minutes to talk to the council.
Good evening. Thank you. This is Russell Joe from Master Builders office in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you for all of your service, council members and mayor. Good evening. Just wanted to touch on a few comments on the traffic impact fees and the park impact fees that are on your agenda this evening. First, a thank you to Russ Wright and his team for conveying and getting to me all the information for this agenda bill. I appreciate the transparency and we're looking at all the information. We are examining the information right now, and I can let the council know that we intend to send a more formal letter in response in the next day or so, by Friday at the latest. With the respect to the traffic impact fees, we would support option 3 that's on your agenda this evening to do the recalculation based on a 5-year average of the CPI-U. In addition, we've looked over most of the fees for 5290 and the other building and fire fees, and they seem to be in line with current costs or other peers in your area in Snohomish County. If there is a particular issue with one of those, we certainly will call it out, but at this point, they seem to be overly just fine overall. The park fees, however, are somewhat of a concern for us, and I'll put more detail in the letter that I just referenced, but we just want to make sure that the fees that are adopted by council are carefully analyzed. We want to make sure that there's a clear connection as we look at the CFP or the CIP from your comprehensive plan adopted in October, and make sure that the adopted level of service from those projects that you have in your CFP and CIP in the future tie to the new development and the level of service in a way that shows that the new development or the new housing that will be coming into your community does impact that level of service, and that the fee is appropriately set and calculated so that it accounts for the impacts for that new development as we go forward. We certainly will communicate with Russ Wright and his team on our concerns and send a formal letter out to you, as I said before, the end of the week. Appreciate the opportunity to comment, and just wanted to let you know that Master Builders is carefully examining this and appreciates the opportunity to comment and participate in the process. I'll be listening to the presentation later, and I wish you a good evening and a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Anybody else online?
Nobody else.
All right, let's move forward then to council business. Council President.
Yes, council, why don't we start with the 2 folks online? Councilmember Tadgett, any comments tonight?
No comments from me. Thank you.
And Councilmember Donahue?
No comments from me.
All right, you're up. Councilmember Ewing?
No comments.
Councilmember Jorstad?
It is that time of year to start getting ready to jump into the lake. Just want to remind everybody, I was very excited to see Chief Bezzo's email coming out about Special Olympics Polar Plunge, which is February 23rd. But if you feel like you want some practice, the Lake Stevens Open Water Swimmers are hosting a New Year's Day Polar Plunge on January 1st at 11 at Lundin. So you can go on the 1st, you can kind of, see if it's your thing and then get used to the water. And then you can show up on the 23rd, raise some money for Special Olympics. So challenging my fellow council members to join me on both of those dates and the mayor.
Yeah.
And everyone, whole city, everybody should be there. We'll see you in the lake. Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
at what time?
The New Year's Day Polar Plunge is at 11 a.m. So you can sleep in a little and then head down to the lake. The February 23rd Special Olympics fundraiser begins at 8:30, 9 o'clock a.m.
And then, Angie, isn't there a cutoff to get a t-shirt? You have to pre-register by a certain date.
For the Lake Stevens Open Water Swimmers, the first 100 people that are there get a sweatshirt. I don't know about the,
Olympics as well. You have to register by a certain date to.
okay, I don't know. I'm looking at the email right now. I don't see it, but maybe it's online. Anyway, get ready.
Great, thank you.
Like-
Councilmember Shipman?
Oh, there, no, it's the weekend. That on me. Anyhow, I attended the senior center board meeting yesterday. And of course, they're gearing up for their Christmas supper. And they gave me one of these. These are one of the little gifts they're going to give to people that come to the supper. And so one of our awesome seniors, named Gina, who is our kitchen manager, makes these every year. She makes things for St. Patrick's Day to give to our seniors and Easter. And she also does fundraisers, like if you want to buy them for a party or something. All the proceeds go to a nonprofit called We Heart All, which helps some different communities in Africa with some necessities that we tend to take for granted. So they're rounding up their year. They'll have all their numbers for me next month. But at this time, they're gearing up for their Christmas supper. So if you know any seniors that don't have any place to go on Christmas, they welcome them.
Is that supper on, what day is that on?
And now let's see if it's,
Looking for it.
the day wasn't listed on their agenda.
Okay,
But yeah, so they didn't discuss the specific days. It should be on their website. I would think.
I'm looking right at it.
Councilmember Daughtry?
I attended a CT board meeting where we talked again about the new innovative services in Lake Stevens and Darrington and Arlington. Looking forward to the 17th when we actually start. I think I've seen a couple of the zip cars out there doing the rounds to get their training done. Let's see, the polar plunge, I would do it, but I did mine in July. So I just got this aversion to really cold water. So I did the really warm water in July. So I was there. Looking forward to Saturday for our tree lighting and other things happening. CT will be there to give out Orca cards and talk about the zip. So we can get a lot of people involved in that. And that's all I have.
Great. And I have nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor, so back to you.
Okay, great. Real quick, last week I had an opportunity to attend what's called the Gov AI Coalition. It was a summit. It was the first summit. This is the coalition that started back in back in the spring, and has since obtained over 1,500 members of government entities. So it's really grown fast, really grown big. What this coalition is doing initially is creating some framework for how government is going to use AI, should implement AI, policies, procedures, different tools that are out there. So it's really embryonic in creating how do we move forward as government in AI. It was a great conversation with a lot of different people. just so the council knows and so our citizens know, we've created a work group within the city staff to begin our AI process. Initially looking at, we're putting together a policy on how we're going to use AI, and then doing some initial small baby steps in this first charter in getting into AI and becoming more efficient as government. So it's good stuff. And I would like to throw out another, I'll be down here for Winterfest this Saturday. We'll be lighting the tree. My hopes are we do what we did last year. It was a one click on the lights. No pause.
Don't jinx it.
No nervous pause on the lights. I don't know who I'm looking at for that one. Is that a Sarah thing or is that an Aaron thing? Sarah thing. Okay. So it'll be, I'm looking forward to it, seeing all our citizens out and smiley faces for Winterfest. I'm going to divert a little bit of time to Barb. She has a department report.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to let council know that our state audit is complete at this point. We did send out an email today letting you know the date for the exit conference. It is next Thursday, sorry, on the 18th, Wednesday. So next Wednesday on the 18th at 4 p.m. It will be via Teams. So if you do want to attend, please let myself and Matthew know so we can keep track, so we know if we need to advertise for a quorum, and we will send you the link. Not to give away too many of the details, I'll let them do that during the next conference, but it is another clean audit. So we did get another year of clean financial and accountability audit, and they can go in the details and let you know what areas they looked at and what a great team we have in the city. So appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for that report. Let's, can I get a motion to pass the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, thank you. And let's move to action item 10A, ordinance 1194, amending Lake Stevens Municipal Code 3.08 related to utility taxes. Barb and Aaron.
Okay. Put this up on my end. Okay, so this is going to be our actual third conversation on the utility tax. We had one during our council retreat, which was open to the public. I don't know that we had very much public there, but and then we have discussed it a couple of times during the budget process, and then again 2 weeks ago when we looked at it originally. So council had asked us to bring back a recommendation. It's on my way. So this ordinance 1194 has been drafted to include the following recommendations. So it does impose a 6% tax on utility providers. The estimated revenues are 1.4 million annually, and that's based on the information that we received from the district. It does not include any increases in the future at this point, so it doesn't include forecasted revenues. That's just an estimated based on the current 2024 number. All revenues received by the city from the sewer utility tax shall be expended for street and sewer maintenance, construction, reconstruction, and expansion projects. That is in the ordinance. That will commit the money to the street fund on our financial statements. The date of enactment is set for March 1st, 2025, or 90 days after the adoption, whichever is later, to allow for communication and implementation. The definition of gross income has been updated, as I mentioned previously, based on some review of our city code by our utility tax legal experts. And then in Lake Stevens Municipal Code, we have utilized the term sewerage versus wastewater, and I will get into that reasoning for you. So based on the proposed term sewerage, the septic service provider in the city would not be subject to the utility tax like they would if we use the term wastewater. Alternatively, the council can choose to use the term wastewater, which would include the septic service. Considerations, so the septic service providers pay the district for sewer services. Payments for those services will be included in the gross income calculation of the district. So if the district chooses to pass a fee along to the customers, the business would also be charged a fee in addition to the tax that the city would be charging them for on their gross income. So it's not double taxation, but the business would be charged twice, once a tax from the city, and then if the sewer district chose to pass on a fee, they would be charged a fee for that portion that they utilize the services of the sewer as well. So I put in some options. We could charge both businesses and the utility district, or both the business and the utility district, the utility tax. The business will pay the city on its gross income. And then if the utility chooses to pass along the fee, then the business would also have to pay that fee to the sewer district. Another option would be to charge both the business and the utility district the utility tax, and then we could add a clause in the section regarding this, it would be wastewater at that time, in that wastewater section that would allow the business to deduct from their reported gross income the amount paid to the district as a reimbursement of the fee on that tax that the district is paying to the city. So some issue is this could cause other utility providers to question our deduction, our reasoning for the deduction when they aren't getting a deduction on their end. So we did look at what the actual septic service does, how we could actually come about this. As I mentioned, the recommendation in the ordinance is to utilize the word sewerage versus wastewater at this point, but that's something that the council can discuss. So if you don't know, a little conversation we had about what they actually do there, the septic company, they receive the septic from the septic pumping. They dewater the waste, treat it, and create biosolids, which are sold for agricultural applications. And then the brown water goes into the Lake Stevens sewer lines and to the plant. And then Lake Stevens Sewer District is paid by the septic company for that service. So that service would become part of the income of the district that they would be paying us a tax on. And I know if you have more questions about the legal side of it, we've been going back and forth with Greg and the team on how to actually deal with this potential look of double taxation. But legally, it is not double taxation if we went in the other direction. Do I have any questions? Anybody want to think about that?
The other direction being?
The other direction is utilizing, right now, it says sewerage, which means that they would not be, they would not be charged. The septic service in the city would not be charged a utility tax. They would just, if the sewer district passed on the fee, as we are assuming they will, they would get charged the fee on their sewer bill that the sewer district would then utilize to reimburse themselves for the tax payment to us.
What about individual septic providers? Septic system providers. There's still septic systems within the city.
We only have one business in the city that would.
Right, but I'm looking on item G of 3.0803, and it says upon every person engaged in or carrying on the business of collecting, conveying, or treating sewage within the city. So wouldn't that be a septic? I'll use Cuz as an example. They're a septic
that comes
gatherer,
into the
I
city.
guess. They would be also subject to this, right?
Septage is a separate classification from sewerage. Septage comes, whoops. By definition, septage comes from septic tanks, right? Where sewerage comes from sewer. So if the waste doesn't go into the sewer system, it would not be taxed under this ordinance. So if somebody's cleaning out septic tanks, putting it into a truck and taking it someplace, as the ordinance is currently drafted, they would not be taxed.
They would not be. Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of thoughts going on. I didn't put a lot of detail or background into this presentation, as we've already discussed a lot of what the needs were, what the uses would be, as well as the tax estimates by the percentage rate. So as our citizen had commented on, Commissioner Wright had mentioned, the fee that would be going to the customers would be more than the tax that we were implementing on the district. So that is correct.
Barbara, do we have know the number, the difference in revenue based on the two different terms we're discussing? Because I think there's very few septic folks that would be subject to that. Do we have a number or a
I
ballpark number?
I don't know. I would have to find out what their gross income is. I would have to reach out to them and find out what that gross income is.
Are you asking how many, other than the sewer district, how many other entities would be impacted?
So, yeah,
One,
it's just one. Just the one business that,
right, Evergreen Sanitation.
okay.
And that's if we changed it to wastewater to include the septage. So I don't have much else except discussion and comment. How do we want to move forward?
Well, just to kind of open our discussion a little bit, I guess I'd like to maybe address a couple of comments that were made tonight. This isn't an issue of blaming one entity or another. This is an issue of trying to find a solution to fix a problem that hopefully doesn't get bigger and cause more problems later. This issue was first explored, I don't remember the time frame, but it's been some time ago. And I believe Gene was at the meeting, regular sewer commissioner meeting. And the topic was asked how much money the sewer district applies to maintain manholes. And I believe it was Jonathan Dix, the superintendent, who replied that about $10,000, $11,000 a year was expended fixing these things. And through the process of evolution, I guess, this issue has kind of grabbed some legs and been talked about on numerous occasions as to there's a deficit of issues out there that need to be fixed regarding the sewer manholes and system. And $10,000 or $11,000 a year doesn't begin to make a dent in any of that. So hopefully that clarifies a couple of things. And again, this is not a situation where we're trying to blame somebody. It's a situation of trying to find a solution to a problem that eventually is going to fall in the city's lap at some point in time. And I think it's more of a situation, we deal with it now or we deal with it later, and it's going to cost a heck of a lot more money. In addition to, I would perceive probably citizen complaints in the sense that things are just not being addressed in our roadways.
Do we have a number of current manholes that need to be addressed? I know as I drive around the city, you don't have to look long before you'll see one where the ring around the manhole is chipping away. Sometimes it's an outright pothole. And at that point in time, it becomes a safety hazard. Tires are known to pop. And then, of course, the city is responsible for reimbursing people. But whenever you have that happen to a car, they could lose control of their car. So while I do agree that, we need to keep up on our streets, I think that's a safety issue. It's not just merely, oh, they're not looking very nice. But there doesn't seem to me, from what I was hearing, a consensus on who's responsible for that ring around the manhole. Like the streets, it's very clear where the city's responsibility, but where that gray area is, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know why it's laid that way. But if you drive down the street, you'll see there's asphalt and then there's a ring around that manhole, which I would assume is so they can just remove that ring if they need to reach the manhole without disrupting the entire street. So if it's used only for the sewer utility, and that's why the street's laid that way, I guess like I said, I couldn't hear a clear consensus on who is responsible for it. The city feels the sewer district should maintain it because it's part of the manhole. And the sewer district said, no, regardless, you're responsible for the street. So then there's this back and forth between the two. But regardless, it needs to be handled. It doesn't sound to me like it's something currently in our budget or even on Public Works worksheet, like on their list of to-do things, because the city feels it's a sewer, the sewer feels it's a city. I think that's one of the challenges of having the two separated instead of it being united, is we're bickering over something that is actually a safety hazard for our citizens. And so if we're going to have to address this with our Public Works, then, and all the staffing and material and scheduling and all of that, it has to be paid somehow. And if it's not already in our budget, and I asked last meeting, is there any place else we can get this money? It sounds like the burden falls on us. And right now it's not technically on us, kind of in a roundabout way, but not in a real clear way. Because when I hear from the discussion is the city feels the sewer should take care of it. But they're not.
Don't bring up roundabouts.
Not that kind of roundabout.
So I would suggest you it is on us. And the reason why is because if something safety wise occurred to someone's car and an accident or something occurred because of lack of maintenance on a manhole, sewer manhole, ultimately it's the city who's going to get the lawsuit involved with that. So I would say that technically it is on us, and the ability to fix our roads with the utility revenue on this is how we do that.
And fixing it in the past has been covered how?
It hasn't.
It hasn't. And that's why they're looking the way they do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the only time they get adjusted is when we're doing an overlay,
Right.
and that's the contractor doing,
And that's a pure city cost.
Or a failure.
or a failure, yeah.
So to that point, I guess one of the issues I'm having trouble with wrapping my head around is if we're talking about this in terms of safety and prevention, I'm looking at the breakdown of costs on page 59 of our packet, and pavement preservation alone looks like it would be roughly covered by a 1% to 2% tax. But then if we're factoring in capital construction, it seems like that kicks it up to the 6% range, if I'm reading this right. And so I guess I'd just like to hear, either from Director Halverson or anyone there who has knowledge on the subject, is there a need or some benefit to building in funding for the capital construction projects with this tax? Or thinking about some of the public comments we heard tonight, if we're going to consider this, would it be better to just start at the low end with 1% to 2%, just cover the pavement preservation, and then step it up from there as needed?
That's Director Halverson here. That's a difficult question to answer, and that's really a policy question. It's honestly up to the council. And we've provided the information for costs for pavement preservation and for capital. Is this not working? Okay. We okay? Okay. I thought I was close to it, but maybe not close enough. I'll restart. So it really is it's a policy question for the council to consider. We've provided the cost for pavement preservation in the past and moving forward. That's better. Thank you. And we've provided a list of capital projects that could be funded using this additional tax revenue. These are projects, these capital projects are in some cases underway. 2 of the 4 are underway and they don't have adequate funding. And so they're sewer construction projects. They've been on the books for a long time and they're projects that are critical to the city's needs and the community's needs. So they were offered as opportunity or as solutions in this case. And that was really at the council's direction at the time. So again, it's a policy decision for the council, and I'm not really here to help you necessarily with that.
Fair enough. If I could ask a follow-up question then, and this is me asking you to look into your crystal ball, so I don't know is an acceptable answer to me in this case. But these types of projects, so say we go with the 6%, we're generating this money, we complete these capital construction projects that are listed in our packet. What is the likelihood that we're going to somewhat regularly have projects of that magnitude where we'll need funding versus, we could end up in a situation where we're bringing in more tax revenue than we need to cover our expenses on this, like on pavement preservation and sewer related capital construction?
Listen, I'd have to take a look at the long list of projects to answer your question. I can certainly do that, if that would help.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Aaron, just a quick question. Are those projects that you list as capital construction, and I'll use Soper Hill Sewer as an example. Is there a possibility or is there likelihood payback of those capital improvements through latecomer fees, frontage assessments, things of that sort?
Well, that's a bit of a land use question, but yes, there is potential payback for latecomers. Now, that depends on the constructability, the feasibility of those properties on Soper Hill. And I think it might take a more analysis to see if that's feasible.
But I guess typically if the sewer district or whoever takes the front of the project and sort of runs with it, installs it in the ground, there's kind of that connection point where the people that front and benefit from that sewage facility would have to pay for that privilege, correct?
That's correct. But I'll be very clear. The idea that you would recoup the costs of the sewer main construction in the 10-year duration that latecomers fees are applicable. My experience has been, doing this for 20 years, you just don't.
My understanding, municipalities have the ability to impose latecomers for not way more than 10 years.
Okay, well, I can certainly look into that and see where that sunsets, but
Yeah.
latecomers fees do sunset, and I don't know exactly what the duration is.
Okay,
here.
okay.
Yeah. Director Wright, did you want to comment on that at all?
No, I was just going to share the point that the city recouping that is probably unlikely, just as you'd already stated, due to the sunset of those types of fees and how they have to be managed.
Could our city attorney address that issue? Latecomer municipalities' ability to assess latecomers?
Well, we have a statutory ability to do that. What the sunset is on top of my head, I can't tell you.
Okay.
I was just gonna see if I could look it up. And
My experience has been, it goes on until the facility is paid for. So.
I don't think so.
Private developer usually has 15 years.
Well, he's looking that up. Do we have any other questions, Barb, Aaron?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. I think it's unfortunate that this conversation has become a manhole conversation, because I just think it's so much more complicated than that. And it's so much bigger than that. The manholes they're front and center, and people are complaining, and it's a visible, tangible thing that we can talk about in reference to this utility tax. But that's not what this is about, right? Like there are multiple needs within our city that are, and we've been talking about it for years regarding our budget, talking about public works, looking at our roads, And I also feel like I read the paper and I talk to my fellow council members in the city of Everett and the city of Edmonds and the city of Linwood, and they're in dire straits, and I don't want to be there. Right. And I think that it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we are fiscally responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And this, I mean, just the spreadsheet shows just a few of the needs that we have regarding pavement preservation, regarding capital construction that are related to the sewers and the wastewater in our city, that are related to our streets. I don't want to get to a point where we are laying off staff because we can't afford to pay our staff and fix our roads, and we have to make those difficult decisions, right? And so this feels to me like, how do we best use the possibilities that we have to stay fiscally responsible, to meet the needs of our city, to fix our roads, to build our sewer mains and our lift stations, and not get to a crisis point. And to me, that's, I think, the way that I am approaching this decision, is making a responsible decision that has as little impact as possible on our constituents, both in their monthly sewer costs and driving their car over the manholes and all of the things, right? Like, yeah, what's the balance? Where do we ensure that we're doing what we need to do as a city, and making sure that we're not creating a financial crisis, and that we're not unduly burdening our citizens? I think that's the bigger picture that I'm struggling with.
Well, I'm going to chime in. Yes, my turn. I agree with the statements, but there are other ways of doing that, other than putting another tax out there. I'm not opposed to utility tax per se. However, I am opposed to 6%. The reason I'm opposed to that is I think that we don't have the manpower in order to take that money and do the manhole covers and things like that with a public works that is already stretched thin. Just doing some really quick math, we could do, if we just did the 2%, we could do 268 manhole covers a year. We don't have 268 that I know of. I think I could be wrong on that, but I don't know how many we have. But the other way of looking at things is, are there other, with only, what was it? I'm sorry, I lost the page. Hold on.
59 is a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'm looking at the spreadsheet up above here. Scrolling. $456,000 at the 2%. We could certainly do quite a bit of that 268 manholes. Or is there $456,000 someplace else in the budget that we might not necessarily need to be doing right now, that we have already planned to put to the preservation and of the roads and manholes? There's a second way of looking at it. We already have money coming in. What are we using it for? Can we reprioritize some of that $456,000 to something else out of the budget, or not? So there's another thing that we can put out there.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I think we did a really thorough job looking at our budget for 2025. And I feel like our department directors were conservative in their requests, and we certainly didn't approve all of those requests. I'd be willing to look at that. I don't feel like there was any fluff in the budget this year that where we could, just scoop back $500,000 and use it for this.
To be clear, I don't either.
Okay.
But because, we work on a budget for a long time.
It's pretty fresh, right? It's not like it's July and we're talking about this. Like I feel like we just went through this process. So to your point, I think that's the responsible way to look at this is, what are all the options?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just say a few words. I don't want to get spun around the axle on sewer manholes either, because Councilmember Jorstad, you nailed it. We have a structural deficit with our streets department. Every year, our budget goes up to maintain the roads, but our revenues are going down. And so the cities were able to implement a utility tax, and we did that on most all utilities in the past to help fund the street maintenance. We used to be able to do that as cities through card tabs. When that went away, now we got this tool in our toolbox, which is utility tax. So it's not just about the sewer manholes. They're failing. And of course, we need to go fix the, sunken manholes and the lines going to them. But the structural deficit for our streets maintenance program remains. And the only way to fix that is to implement utility taxes or additional revenues that we would bring in. This is a tool in our toolbox that we're proposing to use. So I just want to make sure that we continue to look at the whole picture and not just get stuck around. We can only do 6 manholes this year. It's not about that. That's a component of the structural deficit we have in our streets department.
And if I understand it correctly, this tax has to be attached to the very specific things that were listed. So it is attached to the sewer district, their impact as far as, where the roads have sunk in manholes. And it looks like there's some capital projects related with the sewer district. It's not a catch-all 6% we're throwing in a general fund or something that's not earmarked, must be used for specific purposes, correct?
It's going into the street fund to take care of pavement preservation, maintenance, operations, and capital related to the street maintenance and sewer.
Okay.
Yes. And I will address Councilmember Daughtry's comment that we don't have staff to take all of this on, and that is true. We don't have staff to take it all on. But this funding can be used either to contract out for these services or utilize some of the funding for salaries and benefits for staff. So we would allocate some of that when they're doing the work on these things. We would allocate some of these funds to that work. So it would free up some of that for other projects as well.
Apologies. I think this is already.
I think Marcus might have his hand up.
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Hello? Yeah, Councilman Tagent here. I did, to Jean's point, I would say when the legislature gives us tools in our toolbox and we don't use them, it's harder for us to get funding and so forth because they're like, hey, you have this out there and available to be used. And in getting funds for this, these capital projects that we would be doing, this will also help us bring in more revenue from, construction and other things along those lines to help us take care of our roads as well. To the point that Councilman Jorstad said, I think it's not a manhole issue. It's a taking care of the pavement. I know we all get a lot of comments on roads and dips, and my car hits that, and it taking care of our constituents is important. Making sure our roads are safe is really important as well. I would probably be more along the lines of a gradual increase, 4, 5, 6, something like that. Help our people get used to this and make it so it's affordable and continue to take care of our streets. So I'm more of a gradually increasing. I hate doing that, but at the same time, I would rather give them as much opportunity to take care of that financially for their families.
Councilmember Dorsey, did you have something? Did you have something?
I did. Oh, yes. I think this was addressed when we met last, and I'm sorry, I didn't retain the information. Do we know maybe just at like this, the 3% and the 6% levels, what that actually translate to in terms of increases on people's bills? Because I think you had said it's going to be higher if we do a 6% tax, the actual amount that shows up on someone's bill is.
So sewer is $99 a month. So if you did a 6.38%, they'd be paying roughly $6.50 for additional tax. We did 3%. It would be roughly, they'd paying $102. They'd be paying roughly $3 more per month for a residential unit. Was that your question?
Yeah, but I had thought I heard that it was actually going to be more than the 3% or the 6% that would show up on a person's bill.
Because the sewer district, if they were to pass it along, they would also charge a sales tax on our tax. So it would be like, instead of 6%, if we did the 6%, it'd be 6.38%. So it'd be 0.38% higher
Okay.
to accommodate that 6% or the tax that they would be imposing on top of our tax.
I think that's the part I was missing. Thank you.
That's a very fair question. I guess for me, I'll just weigh in. I guess it's helpful for me to see, kind of like with the Transportation Betterment District, it's helpful for me to see the deficits and to see, you know, where a list of project and prioritization of the projects and where that goes. I understand we have that for it's helpful for me to see like the need and exactly where that those resources are going. And with the Transportation Betterment District, it's been easy for us to see how we've been able to stretch those funds by getting grants. You know, like for the 91st Street, we got some significant grant funding. So anything that we can do to communicate that we're doing, it's a responsible use of resources. I'm not saying this is an unfair comparison, but a recent ballot measure we had with the Port Authority, you know, where there wasn't a clear list of projects, and that was overwhelmingly rejected, you know, about 70% to 30% by the citizenry. So I think the citizens, you know, do appreciate having, myself included, you know, list of seeing where those resources are going. I agree that our city does a very good job of being responsible with our resources, but I think we need to make sure that we're sufficiently transparent with our desire to maintain safe roads and be fiscally responsible if we do so.
Marcus has his hand up again.
Marcus, you got more?
Yeah, I had one follow-up question to the utility committee. Have you guys heard if the sewer district is going to raise their rate? Have they talked about raising rates as well? And if so, how much are they looking to raise it?
I've myself have heard no talk of the sewer district increasing rates in the next foreseeable future. They obviously did raise it by $13 a month, what, a year and a half ago?
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't had any discussion at the utility committee about the want or the need, I believe, for the sewer district to raise their monthly rates.
Likewise.
So I guess my follow-up question would be, do they have the funds to take on some of the capital improvements? Because I think as part of the agreement, they were supposed to bring sewer down to our business district in Hartford. So do they have the funds to do that so we don't have to? And then we could use funds that we were planning on using that for something else for the roads?
My guess is probably not. Otherwise, it would have been done.
Because that's how much is the capital improvement project to bring sewer to that Hartford is pretty expensive. So, and as part of the face of the agreement that we have with them, they were supposed to bring that sewer to there as part of this agreement. And if they don't have the funds to do it, because if we didn't have to do it, then we would be able to use those funds for other things, for the roads, for the manhole covers. So my curiosity is, why have they not allocated funds to do that yet?
Is that a question or a rhetorical?
It's kind of a conversational piece, I guess. I'm just trying to think of when we talk about trying to find other funds in our budget for roads, so we don't have to put this tax on. I'm trying to think of other ways we maybe are not using funds somewhere else to help pay for this. That was my question, my thought.
Yeah.
And can I ask a question that I think everyone else already knows the answer, but why, if we were to tax the sewer district, 3% or 6%, why are they adding an additional tax to it? How does that work? I guess I don't understand why, if we did a 3% tax, they just wouldn't, if they're going to pass it on to sewer customers, why it wouldn't just be 3%? Why is there a separate tax being added to it? I just don't understand how that works.
I can explain that. The tax when it comes, so since they are, we tax the sewer district. If they pass it on, it's no longer a tax, it's a fee. So now it becomes part of their gross income. And so that fee coming in gets taxed. So the fee is actually, I just had my spreadsheet up and.
So it's a state tax on the fee.
Yes. It's a tax, we're able to tax that income. And so it's just an overall taxation of all income.
So basically, we're taxing the sewer district. When they increase their fees, it's not counted as a tax, it's just counted as revenue. And then they're taxed on that revenue.
Yes.
So they're going to add an additional tax to cover the tax
Additional
of that
fee,
revenue
yes.
or initial fee. Okay.
Mhm.
Just, so is it
Yeah.
just a fee? Would it be a monthly fee then? Is it a percentage?
It's,
Kind of the same?
they will likely run it as a percentage.
Okay.
Yeah. I can tell you at 1%, instead of being 99 cents that we'll be taxing the city or the district 99 cents. The fee that they would pass on would be $1. And at 6%, it would be $6.30. So instead of $5.94, it's an additional 36. I think it's 36 cents on there. So
you see the same thing on your Puget Sound Energy bill or your
Mhm.
PUD bill. It's the exact same thing.
you can't
that you would-
calculate that
that you would see.
6%. You have to look at it and it'll be slightly off because it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's no different than those bills.
That makes sense. Thank you.
This is an action item. Can we look at a motion and get a motion discussion going?
I guess I don't know if I have a motion, but I sense, getting a temperature of the room here. For me, I would feel more comfortable with a two-tiered implementation because I don't know that we are, adequately prepared to, implement, the full fee immediately. So if this were to be put forward, I think a two-tiered implementation would be appropriate.
Okay, can we get a motion?
For the purpose of discussion, opening this to discussion amongst the council members, I would make a motion to approve ordinance 1194.
Okay, I have a motion to approve ordinance 1194. Do I have a second?
Is there a percentage? in
So that would be the percentage that's currently in it.
The
which is
full
6%.
6%.
So you could second it and then in discussion, make amendments to.
I'll
move
second
that.
it.
Okay, so I have a
Talk about it.
second on the motions and I'll open the floor to discussion.
So Councilmember Ewing, what would you propose as far as a tiered percentage? What are your thoughts?
I think a 3% would be a starting point, and really the top end really depends on, for me, what we have. Like it's hard for me to recommend something when I don't have something where the funds are, like, I feel comfortable articulating exactly where those funds are going. I understand the need. But I would start with 3%. And if we had supporting information, then I would be comfortable going to 6%. But I don't have that information in front of me.
Do you not feel like the spreadsheet that we were provided that shows the cost of the annual overlay costs, the trench and manhole costs, and the capital construction costs? Does that not feel, I think that's on page 59,
Yeah,
like adequate?
it's not.
Okay.
So I think a way to think about this is, as far as implementation, is obviously, I think that there would be some immediate safety manhole. Again, I don't want to focus on manhole, but there's some immediate ones, but you got to think, this is this is a streets fund revenue. So instead of doing, Aaron, help me out, 2 miles of overlay a year, we're doing, this supplements that capability in not only overlaying streets that are run over by heavy trucks every day, blah, 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 utility trucks. Because remember, this isn't the only utility providing money into that streets fund, right? So it extends that overlay capability. And we all know there's several roads in our city that need overlay work. So let's don't be myopic on just manholes. Let's think about our streets and our street health overall and what this revenue would do to extend the life of our overall streets.
Yeah, I do think, thank you for that. I think that this information that we've been provided specific to this fund, but also the conversation in the whole budget process and our retreat does, for me, illustrate the need that we have. And I think the ability that we do have to meet that need, coupling our internal staff with things that we may bid out to get work to get done. Because I would agree, we don't have the robust staff to meet all of the street needs that we have in our city, but we do have, you know, we have the bidding process, we have relationships with companies who have done that work for us before. So I do think that we have the need demonstrated to use these funds. And I think we need to be conscientious of where we're at, just in our state, in our nation regarding, you know, the economy and the burden that this would place potentially, especially on those folks that are vulnerable citizens. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's a very important point. All that to say, I would support a tiered approach as well, to help folks sort of address the burden that this is going to cost for them. And I would support a 3% and a 6%. I do think that we have the need illustrated and could put those funds to work.
So how long after the 3%? How long after?
The timeline that you have between the 3% and 6%.
I would propose a 3% in 2025 and a 6% in 2026. And
I would more,
I think that part of our job would be to revisit that decision during the budget conversation next fall, depending on where we're at in terms of the work that we can get done and in terms of our economy and our citizens.
I could better support a 3% in 2025 and a 6% in 2027.
Councilmember Donahue has his hand up.
Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with a lot of what's been said, but you know, kind of somewhere in the middle between Councilmember Ewing and then what you said, Mayor Gailey. I mean, our conversation gives me the impression, you know, there's a lot of things we need to take care of that, you know, these funds could be used for that aren't on the table we have on 59. I mean, I appreciate the work that went into that, and I can see how that lines up with the proposed revenue. But if there are other projects and things, you know, even that we're talking about verbally that we could add to this, I'm thinking more about people, you know, in the community who are going to find out about this and they're going to want to know what the heck happened. And it would be great to have something written, you know, that kind of covers more of those big picture things that we need to address as a city. And so, you know, all that is to say, I would support a stair-stepped approach as well. But to, you know, Councilmember Ewing's point, I would really like to have more of that big picture stuff laid out to the extent reasonable and possible, just so that our citizens can, you know, as easily see that and digest that as possible.
Okay. Can I get an amendment for graduated?
I would move to amend the motion to add a graduated fee structure, tax structure that would implement a 3% tax in 2025 and a 6% tax in 2026.
I'll second.
Okay, I have an amendment to amend the original motion for a 3% in 2025 and a 6% in 2026 with 6% ongoing after that.
Correct.
Okay. And I have a second on that. What's the discussion on the amendment?
I just would like, you know, by having a graduated thing. Like I said, nobody can really has a crystal ball on our economy, and I think this will help our citizens by starting with a lower rate. And that also will give our city an opportunity. I know they've already done a deep dive on this and you've given us a lot of information, but that will kind of give us a starting point and to move forward from there. And then we'll have, you know, in front of us, okay, so these are the things that need to be taken care of right now. These are urgent concerns. And then once we bump it up to the 6%, we can have a clear message for our citizens, which I'm hearing, you know, that's a desire as well. That gives us time to put that together, while at the same time gives us a starting point to do some of these urgent things, not to focus on manhole covers, but that's something that really does need to be addressed, because you can drive down numerous streets and see they need repair.
Is there a way to do a bailout on this in 2020, the budget discussion in 2026 to revisit going automatically to the 6%?
I don't see why not.
Well,
We've
You
written
could
fees
always
resolutions
revisit
just
it.
like
You
that.
just revisit the
You can
ordinance.
revisit the ordinance at any time.
So we have our fees resolution is written the same way in for like stormwater. It actually, no, not tax fee, but it shows 2025 is going to be this, 2026 is going to be this, 2027, and we can write the ordinance like that, but council can revisit it anytime.
Yep.
How about with the proviso that prior to implementing the 6%, we receive a detailed list of improvements from Public Works?
Well, that came from the fund. That came from this tax.
Planned for the tax.
That's planned for the tax,
Right.
not coming from the tax, but would.
Okay, there'd be two of them. What did we do in 2025 with the 3%?
So it's a thing to remember is we will not start receiving this until
It'll be imposed
90 days.
after March 1st at this point, and then it will be, I believe it'll be, yeah, it should be sometime in March.
Assuming they adopt monthly,
We actually, I believe we have in there that they can do quarterly.
right? So
Um,
that'd be out in June then.
Yeah.
Be
So-
120 days or
March would be in
180 days.
April, and then, yeah, so
right. So you're
June.
Okay, well, I'm going to rescind that we need to proviso because we can ask for this anytime we want as a council. So we don't have to have a proviso in the ordinance.
That's fine.
yeah. So just understand, you're not going to have a full 225
Right.
revenue. You're probably going to maybe have half. And by budget season, you might have a quarter of it.
So the estimate for a 3% rate is 684. That would be for a full year. So we should assume that we would have
350.
probably half of that.
By the end of the
Maybe
year.
by the end.
But we will do pavement preservation and that work during the summer. So we won't have, it'll be rolling forward into the next year.
Yeah.
Sure.
You wouldn't use that money till 26.
Not for pavement preservation,
majority
but we
would be
could
next
use
year.
it for
Planning those things.
some of the
yes.
other, right, and some of the other items that are on this list
Mm.
in the fall, perhaps. So I think I would agree with Councilman Daughtry. I think it would be great to, when we enter into the budget work that we'll do next fall for 2026, it would be great to see what revenue has been realized and how we've used that revenue, even though we understand it's not going to be the full year's amount.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, since this is in the ordinance, that a specific use that we're committing it to use it for the street fund, it will have to show that in our financial statements as committed ending fund balance versus just an assigned. It's assigned if it's just in the fund, like our garbage taxes, it's just assigned to the fund. But it has to show, we have to show it as committed, which means we'll have to keep track of what it's being used for, what's coming in, just so we can show how much is remaining at the end of the year for reporting purposes anyway.
I think that's just important.
Basically the same as a TBD.
Yeah, pretty much. Mhm. TBD is a little bit more strict, but yeah.
I have an amendment. Can we vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Can I get a call for vote? Anybody?
Call for the vote.
Okay, let's call for a vote on the amendment. The amendment is to change the 6% in the original motion to a 3% in 2025 with a increase to 6% in 2026 and ongoing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. And we'll go back to the original ordinance motion. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
What's the original?
So we're voting on the original motion
As-
to pass this ordinance.
As amended.
As amended.
amended.
Yes. Got
I'm
it.
sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Aye.
So we're voting on the original motion as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, note, Councilmember Ewing was an aye on the no.
Or nay, whichever.
Or no.
I approve the amendment and oppose the ordinance.
Okay. All right, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is 10B, interim ordinance 1192 adoption compliance with SB 5290. David.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, council members, David Levitan, Senior Planner. I'm going to keep this really brief. We had introduced this to the city council back on November 19th. So it's a proposed interim ordinance to comply specifically with the timeline review requirements of Senate Bill 5290, which was signed into law back in May 2023, amended multiple sections of the Local Project Review Act. The focus of the ordinance is on the timeline review, basically the amount of time the cities have to review different types of project permit applications. There are also some other components that I'll touch on briefly that provide a little bit of a segue into the discussion of the fee update that Russ and Christy and Carol will be discussing later tonight, as well as some reporting requirements as well. So just at a very high level, Senate Bill 5290 amended the Local Project Review Act. There's now a tiered approach for review timelines for type 1 applications. So those with no public notice or public hearing. It's 65 days for type 2 applications here in Lake Stevens. So public notice, but no public hearing is 100 days. And for types 3, 4, and 5 permit application types, so public notice and a public hearing is 170 days. So as I mentioned, there are some other components. As you get into your later discussion tonight of the proposed fee updates and the potential fee ordinance, Section 9 of 5290 provides the foundation to establish a reasonable fee structure that are intended to recover the true cost of permit review. And that can include both direct costs and indirect costs. So indirect costs would be things like department operations, administrative costs, the cost of vehicles for inspections. So basically, if you provide the methodology and do the analysis, you can incorporate that into your fee structure. As I mentioned, that will be discussed in more detail in the next agenda item on tonight's meeting. So interim ordinances at a very high level, they're authorized by RCW 3678-390. So cities can adopt interim ordinances without a public hearing so long as they subsequently hold a public hearing within 60 days of the effective date of the interim ordinance. They're effective for 6 months, or that can be bumped up to 12 months with development of a work plan. The city has developed a work plan basically to fold the permanent regulations into the larger process code work, which is ongoing. That's included in Exhibit A to Attachment 1. It can then be extended in 6-month increments as needed if additional public hearings are held on the interim regulations. And then the ultimate adoption of the permanent regulations would supersede, basically replace the interim ordinance. So the ordinance is included in Attachment 1 of your packet tonight. Adopts the updated review timelines, clarifies determination of completeness and consolidated review, identifies some of the items that are exempt from these timelines. It kind of within the ordinance language, the whereas language notes that the city has already adopted the required 3 measures, things like increasing its staffing level and other items that are specifically intended to streamline permit review process. And then notes that this would be effective for up to 12 months. Our intent is to adopt the the permanent regulations before the expiration of that 12-month period. So staff is recommending that City Council adopt interim ordinance 1192 tonight. We would then schedule a public hearing, would need to happen on or before your February 11th meeting. So we can move that up as needed. And staff will continue to refine the process code work plan, and over the coming months, we'll work with the Planning Commission and then periodically check in with the City Council on developing recommended code language for permanent amendments to chapters 1416A and 1416B. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for David? Wow. Good job, David.
I'll just say, I appreciate our meeting on the 19th, I think clarified a lot of the sort of the process and why we're doing this the way that we're doing it. And it sounds like, even though there are timelines sort of set up, we're kind of ahead of the curve in terms of meeting or exceeding those timelines. I feel really comfortable with moving forward in this direction.
All right, can we get a motion on this?
I move to approve ordinance 1192.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve interim ordinance 1192. And I have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, good work on that, David. Let's move forward to looks like we have a discussion item on draft land use and building permit fees. We've got Russ, Christy, and Carol. She's a Crystal.
She is a gem.
NRI. Yeah.
Russ Wright, Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens. I'm going to start us off tonight, and I will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to Christy Schmidt, our planning manager, and Carol Manis, our building official, as the experts to walk through the fee analysis that they've prepared for their disciplines. So okay, again, we're here to talk about the permit fee update and also about impact fee updates. I wanted to point out the obvious to the council tonight. There's been a considerable amount of discussion over the last few months, both in our city and other cities, with the impacts of taxes, fees, and other types of revenue. And so we do take this seriously. But as you've heard in the last presentation, that this is an opportunity for the city to look at some of its deferred fees and to make sure that we are recovering the costs for the services that we provide. And as in the last couple of discussions, our services vary from roads maintenance to making sure that people have safe buildings to live in, and that we keep, our environmental constraints also functioning highly. So again, this is another service that the city provides. And under the recent House bill passed last year, 5290, one of the things that cities have to do is audit their cost recovery. So we're being asked to do more now in a quicker time frame, and in return, the legislature has suggested that we can meet some parameters, increase our staffing level. The council has provided us with 2 additional staff members to make sure that we are meeting our timelines and being efficient. Council has also allowed us to maintain a professional services budget to hire consultants if we have overflow work. And so we do try to be efficient, but those do have costs that come along with them. And so as part of that, we've gone through an analysis of our land use and building permit fees. Some of this will be repetitive from a couple of months ago, but it's still background information that I just wanted to walk through closely with the council, describe our overall methodology, and then again, I'm going to turn it over to Carol and Christy from there. So again, why are we doing this? Well, under the Local Project Act review, we have to account for the fees that we charge, and we have to ensure that they are reasonable fees so that the fees are tied directly, again, to that service being provided. This includes the direct fees, and it also includes some indirect costs. At the last time we talked about this in October, just for a background to council, I shared with you the history of our major fee updates. What's really important to recognize in this timeline is that in 2005 and in 2009 is when the council established the primary fees for both building and land use permits. So we're looking at 15 and nearly 20 years of time frame without subsequent fee updates for those services. That's why some of the fees may look a little shocking when they're over 100% increases. But again, those have been deferred. They haven't included inflationary costs tied to the consumer price index for significant periods of time. So now we're doing a correction and then would propose to do slight fee adjustments every year, again, tied to that consumer price index. Specifically, you'll hear us talk about CPIU, and that is the index most appropriate to use for planning level decision and permit fees. Barb can explain more if needed, but she tells me that's the one to use. So that's the one we're going to use. The other part of that, when we talk about that, what we propose moving forward, the CPIU is going to have fluctuations every year. So say during the pandemic, you might have seen those spike. When the budgets are flush, that may go down. So we're proposing to use a rolling 5-year average. So we're looking at the 5 prior years to level out whatever that index may have shown. So again, you don't have peaks and valleys every year in the distribution of this cost adjustment if adopted. Some of the overall things I wanted to share with you, we also did, we touched base with you on what are our peer cities look like. And the utility of doing that is twofold. It really sets bookends for the council to consider when we look at, in this case, we looked at peer cities, and those are cities of similar makeup between 30, 50,000 population in the central Puget Sound. And we also looked at neighboring cities. So what are the people in our backyard doing? I won't say that those fees should be taken as the gospel for setting our own fees, but again, they provide those bookends of, you know, where we should think about where we land. And on the left of the screen, you'll see a table published by the Department of Commerce in their fee guidance. And what they suggest is you will see in areas of the state with higher median incomes, obviously the economies are potentially more robust and your permit fees are usually going to be higher. So there is a parallel between median income and the cost of your permit fees. So again, looking at our peers, looking at some other methodology, we're just trying to understand the mechanics of the local economy and to make sure that we are in line and not exceeding what's expected. So some overall assumptions. Again, we looked really closely at the Department of Commerce, their guidance on how to develop and established permit fees. And they talk about a couple of things where there's an hourly average permit review you can do, a couple of different models. So we're really doing a hybrid model that we establish the reasonable fee to process permits and ensure our cost recovery. So in the land use fees, what that starts with is an hourly average permit review. That accounts for what are the wages and the benefits. And we've provided that information generally for the average of staff reviewers. It's somewhere around $120 an hour with benefits. For directors, that's around $210 salary and benefits. That number looks higher because it's not a composite number and all of our directors are in the same band. When we see, then we're going to look at some of the indirect costs for operations and maintenance. That's, the vehicles that we purchase, the upkeep of those vehicles, the software that we use, printers, ink, all of those things that go into our operations to provide that function. Then there's another fee that is established, a multiplier that goes along with that. And then the third step we took is, so we've established what the base fee is, we've established a multiplier for the indirect costs. Then we either measure directly through our permit system, how long has it taken us to do permit types, and for other permit types that have limited examples, we've made estimates, best guess estimates, interviewing staff, et cetera, to come up with the time that it takes to process individual permits. With building permits, we're using a value-based approach. So that's pretty consistent with every other jurisdiction with building permit fees. The current valuation table we use, again, was established around 2005 and follows the universal or the uniform building code. Since then, we've been in the international code cycles for numerous years. So that's extremely out of date. And again, it's never been updated to show inflation. And so the current table that's being proposed really looks closely at what the city of Linwood has done. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting over the last couple of years and would closely look at the table that they've provided, again, as an example. So moving forward, just some other things that we need to retain. We need to retain those pass-through fees for consultants. So if we have our staff to do the work, that's great. If we need professional expertise, legal advice, that is another fee that we have to pass on to our customer to, again, do our cost recovery. And then we've already talked about the inflator based on the consumer price index that we would be proposing to do annually. And again, to sort of address what some of the fee increases look like, according to the Department of Commerce, when fees are updated regularly, especially these time-based fees that we're talking about, they reflect the current wages, the market conditions, and then they are the most accurate and reliable fees to use for those services. So I wanted to also share this table with you, again, from the Department of Commerce. And it just emphasizes what I've already talked about in a different way. Graphically, it just shows, so what goes into a permit review cost. Again, there are the direct costs, and then there are the indirect costs. And we've tried to reflect both of those in our approach. So this is also a repeat slide you saw from our earlier presentation of how do we compare with our peer cities. Well, on average, the peer cities are charging between $140 an hour or 30% higher than we're doing. Our proposed fee would be $120 an hour. Some of the average Snohomish County peer cities, their base building fees are 30% higher than ours. So again, we are coming from behind. Land use fees, what we've seen, some are between 30 to 50% higher. And again, we're just using those as indicators of where we're at, but our analysis has shown what those true costs are to be, more reflective of our staff and the work that we're doing and what it takes for us to process. And, as we went through this, there are definitely some fees that are not easy to categorize. There are not good comps in other cities just because we call things something that's slightly different. We process it a slightly different way, but we do recognize that. And we've talked a lot about the capturing of the direct and indirect costs, and then also looking to the future to make sure that we are applying an appropriate inflation factor so we don't have to have this conversation for another 5 years. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the team, and they can sort of go through the initial results, and then they can go through the land use fees and the building permit fees in more depth. And they will also provide a discussion of impact fees. And then I will return and do a summary and talk about some of our recommendations. Christy, Carol, go ahead.
All right. And Russ, did you want to continue with your PowerPoint, or shall I pull up my PowerPoint?
Nope, I will try to keep tempo with you.
Thank you. So if you want to switch to the next slide, I think it's building. We'll start with building, and I'll turn it over to Carol Manis, our building official.
So good evening. We did talk a little bit, Russ explained a little bit. We are using the city of Linwood kind of as our template. Our comparable peer cities, there are 7 other cities. Out of the 7 cities, we are the second to lowest building permit fees, only lower by the city of Puyallup that hasn't updated their building fee since 2008 either. When we discussed this with the building officials at the beginning of last month, they are waiting to see what we do to update theirs in our local jurisdictions. So you'll see that also. So the city of Linwood is who we kind of mimicked our building permit style after. And our goal is to simplify and modernize our fees. As Russ explained, we haven't updated them since the UBC, which was 8 building code cycles ago. We change building code cycles every 3 years on average. So that's been quite some time ago. So our goal is to make permit fees easier and make them meet the construction standards of terminology. Staff and customers alike spend a lot of time entering per fixtures counts on our online portal and calculating fees by fixture. So we have proposed to adjust our fixture counts and make them more user-friendly based on a percentage of the building permit fee. We will still continue to do our reviews and check things according to the energy code, the mechanical code, and plumbing code, but we're hoping to remove the counting fixtures and having inspectors count fixtures in the field, and then have customers come back and change permit fees to make things comply with the auditor for what we're doing in the field. Right now, we are also proposing on residential fees to do a percentage for residential new fees, similar to the city of Linwood, and that would be a percentage. So what we're hoping on new and large additions for residential fees to be 10% of the building permit. So I did a bunch of research and ran most of our typical houses that have been built in the last 3 years here. And our typical house building permit fees are about $2,800 to $3,200, depending on the size of the house and the design of the house. So that would put our fee for plumbing and mechanical $280 to $320 or $340, depending on the size of the project. And right now, our average plumbing permit fees are approximately 280 to 340 fees. So it's not a big change to those contractors. It's just a simplified method. Same with the mechanical. So that will hopefully help customers in the field who are irritated when they have to come back in and revise their permits. So hopefully we're going to get rid of some waste and make our permit process a little bit more efficient. And that kind of goes with how we move forward with Lean. So Russ, if you'd go ahead and move me forward.
I got a question real quick.
Sorry.
So your permit fees you're talking about on this, that also includes the inspections.
Yes, permit fees include permit process and inspections. And then there is a percentage, which is the plan review fee which is where we review the drawings and the construction reports and structural calculations and energy code.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
So the methodology also is we're hoping to simplify table 2B of the miscellaneous building permit page. What we're doing is we're taking all the fees we can back to the table 1A based on value of construction instead of having so many different options of fees. We're using some new terminologies on that table 2B for the miscellaneous pages. We had fees called manufactured homes. We didn't include commercial for schools or educational or industrial buildings. We just called them mobile homes on the previous fee schedule. So we're just trying to update some things and get current language. We have been requested to put in some options for overtime inspections and overtime plan review for projects that want to go faster and get out of the queue or have weekend inspections and keep working through the weekend. And that hasn't been in our fee schedule before. So we're proposing that in the building miscellaneous fees at time and a half, the $120 times 1.5. So we're proposing to do that there. And then Senate bill, we're trying to clarify also how many reviews people get. And that's what Dave was talking about. So the Senate bill 5290 requires that cities decide after 2 full reviews. So on the 3rd plan review, if someone submits 2 sets of resubmittals, it is our responsibility to decide to either approve the application or deny it moving forward unless we have a joint decision for more time between the city and the applicant. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to clarify that in all the fee schedules. So it just goes with the Senate Bill 5290 language that these fees are based on those 2 reviews and 2 resubmittals. So on the 3rd one, we have to talk about additional hours of staff time if they change the scope of work or if they're not doing complete response to corrections, that kind of thing. And right now we get a lot of those kind of projects, just to clarify with people. And then the other fee that we hadn't had before, and we get questions about pretty regularly, is how to reinstate an expired permit. Happens a lot. And we get that question a lot, and we hadn't had a fee option for that before. So we have included it in our options. Any questions for me?
So what does that look like to reinstate? Because if someone's permit expires and they update the building code, are they then required to update their plans to the current building code, or they get grandfathered into the previous code?
So the expired permits that go across a code cycle, we would not reinstate. So all the other permits that expire because people have gotten them through the process, or if they've applied and haven't proceeded with comments, or they haven't done inspections to keep them moving, those are the ones we would reinstate. And they're based on an hourly rate for staff time to relook at them to make sure that where they're at their project, or if they have to do some upgrades to their building, say if they didn't dry in their building and they need to do some more shear wall reinforcing because it's gotten wet and damp, or feed reports. So it's based on an hourly rate after that. We just included it because before we didn't have an option.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question. This has always bothered me. I mean, you've taken care of one of the things that's always bothered me as a contractor. And that is to get rid of the counting pieces of plumbing, and those that's always bothered me because it doesn't take that much longer for an inspector to go in and inspect, 3 toilets instead of 4 toilets or 2 toilets. The other one here is on several of these is table 1A based on value. So a deck, for instance, when I used to build decks before I started falling off of them a lot, I decided, I'd bring in a deck. It's going to cost this much money for parts or for materials and labor to build a deck. So they took it up, percentage of that was the permit fee. So based on value, it's usually a lot higher than what it would be based on time for doing the permit, reviewing the drawings and to do an inspection, because most of my inspections were done in 15 minutes. So I don't understand why we're still doing value instead of doing the same thing we're doing on basically plumbing, based on time of staff.
So so in the handout for the building fee analysis, we did do some looking at what value equals for staff time. And so we did do an analysis for the table and looked at, based on the value of the project, how many inspections you could get for that project. So we did do some of what you're talking about. A lot of times contractors don't want to be have a hidden cost. And so based on value seems to be the easiest way for contractors to know what the project is and how much that permit fee is going to be. It's a universal standard across all building departments in our local area. There wasn't one that did by hour. And I think it's mostly because contractors don't want to be got hidden fee later that they can't pass on to our customers. If that makes sense. So if you're
makes sense.
Yeah, if you're doing a project, you don't want to have a $500 permit fee when you think the project is a smaller project, based on time. If your inspections take longer than 15 minutes a piece, which some of them do, we wouldn't know that until we were out there in the field with you doing the construction.
So the problem that I see is in this economy, and well, especially during the during times when we have hurricanes in the south and we do all that kind of stuff, and your product goes way up in prices, the value goes up, but the time necessary to do the permitting and the inspection stays the same. So if the value goes up, I'm paying more for the same.
Maybe I can add one point of clarification. So the value, even though you may assess a value, it's the table that assesses the value. So it's not your value of material, it's what the International Code Council sets for framing. What's a standard framing of a house? And then we're going to look at those valuations, and they've applied a labor index, insurance, and all that. So it's not necessarily that you estimate your project is going to cost $10,000. It's what does the table assess that scale of work to be. So that really isn't fluctuating.
Okay, so I'm not going to continue this argument. We'll do it sometime else because I don't want to waste any more council time. However, if I'm putting in a permit for a deck, for instance, I'm always asked, what's the value?
Yeah.
And so why am I asked that if you're going to go to table 1A and we're to the table
Understood.
and tell me what tell me what I'm going to be paying based on that value? Why does my value have to be in that permit?
Understood.
So if you apply for a permit through our permit software, it's going to ask you, how big is your deck? And it's going to tell you what the value of that deck is. And that's what it's going to do the fee based on. It's based on size, not based on value.
Totally understand, but why am I asked how much the contract is for, basically? We'll belabor it later.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a great topic for our retreat.
Yeah.
Well, be prepared because land use fees are next. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Russ. Christy Schmidt, Planning Manager here. This evening, I would like to go through the methodology and assumptions that have been included in your packet for the land use fees. You have 20 pages of mathematical formulas before you that establish the proposed draft land use fees. I would like to just explain and go into a little more detail of what Russ summarized earlier, what the methodology is based on. It's really based on cost recovery. And what I did is I went ahead and I looked at, for each permit, the hours that it took staff to conduct the review. And in addition, I would like to point out, if you do look at your handout, that the permit types have been categorized by the 6 different categories of permits. So the resolution previously had been broken down essentially by type 1 and then in alphabetical order. So the methodology is simplifying the fees, breaking them down by permit type, by hourly cost and direct cost. And what this does is it ensures a full cost recovery for permitting services. And this way, the public does not subsidize these services that the applicants are applying for their land use fees. We also have established pass-through consultant fees. So you will see in the assumptions direct cost. For an example, we have a hearing examiner fee, which is $2,000, public notice, which is $445. That includes your land use notice signs, includes publication, etc. And in addition, in your value menu for your permit, you receive, according to 5290, you'll receive 2 complete submittal reviews that includes all the public noticing, along with a land use decision, along with required inspections. Then after 2 reviews, each subsequent review is subject to hourly staff fees. So it really provides a surety to the applicant what they get for their land use permit application. Let me take a look here to see what other additional details I might be missing to tell you. And Russ, did you want to move forward in the slide? One other thing is that the business license and home occupation applications, if you're a business owner here in the city, you'll realize that we do our permitting through Department of Revenue. They have their own unique system. We are subject to their software upgrades and timing. So we are proposing based on their schedule. We can do our updates in June. So we're proposing to come back to you early next year with proposed new business license and home occupation fees, along with other fees that have been proposed to be delayed till mid next year. You will see in the proposal this evening that not all the fees are going up. Some are being reduced, some are being proposed to remain status quo based on review times and the costs of what it actually takes to review the fee. What we're proposing, without going through every single fee, is to really monitor the fees and take a good look at them within a year to see where we compare. The reason why I bring this up is because the comparables that we had last year, those are literally jurisdictions who most of them have not done their updates, their cost recovery, which is what we're doing now. So they're a snapshot in time. When we go out and look at our comparable and peer cities next year, it may look differently. We may not be middle of the road. We may be a lot lower, or we may be higher. We don't know. We have the snapshot of what we have for 2024, and we can use that as a base comparison, but we have to think ahead and continue to monitor and analyze different fees out there for other jurisdictions for the upcoming year as all the cities go through their cost recovery process. Then the last thing I would say, consider an increase for our technology fee. Currently, our 3% fee that we have does not cover the costs for our software and our permitting costs. So there is a deficit there. And with that, Russ, if you want to maybe slide forward to the next one, let's open it for questions and discussion for the council. It's a lot of information. So my attempt here was to simplify it and to let you dig in and ask questions where you feel appropriate.
Any questions on the land use fees before we talk about impact fees? A lot of information, but it's pretty straightforward. And I think that in your packet, there's a lot of documentation that shows where those came from.
I will admit I have one correction out of the 20 pages. It's on page 8. I did have a little too high a fee for the binding site plan fee. I accidentally included public hearing costs for $2,000. So that has been corrected, and the fee has been reduced by about $2,445. So I just wanted to share that for accuracy. Okay, with that.
Question,
Yes,
before you
Mayor.
move on to impact fees, how long is that going to take?
For you, tell me how long you'd like it to take.
30 seconds.
Okay.
It's going to take longer than that.
Okay.
I can be really quick with concurrency and impact fees.
Because executive session, we're looking at what? 30 minutes?
So you should move to extend now. if That's what you're getting. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go 30 seconds or less.
Okay. Wow. Love it.
On this slide.
Ish.
Oh, I'm going back.
I'll give you some ish there.
Okay. Okay, love impact fees. So the city, we are charged with concurrency. What does that mean? It is the city's responsibility to provide adequate public facilities to those residents who are occupying new developments within a specified time frame, and that time frame is 6 years established by the RCW. We have taken our first step in accomplishing our mathematical formula. City Council adopted the comprehensive plan in October. What this does is it establishes our growth targets for employment, housing, and commercial uses. And let's see, missing one. Housing units, people, and employment. So in the comprehensive plan, it also establishes a level of service, which creates a need. We've identified capital projects to fulfill those needs. And where we are at now is the city has a portion of money that we will contribute to these capital projects. And then we need to determine and estimate what proportion the development shall pay. And so here we are before you with the proposal for park impact fees with 3 options, and then also traffic impact fees. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at first the park impact fees, which we heard from Master Builders earlier this evening. There are 3 options in front of you. And first, Russ has a slide, or we have a slide in here, I should say, about the comparable impact fees that we looked at earlier a month or so ago. It shows us really we're pretty much kind of in the middle with our peer cities. Linwood and Monroe were a little bit low. And so when you look at our capital plan, we have $40 million of park projects. We have a wonderful park system. It's something our community desires to have and to maintain. So that's important for our council to keep in mind as we look at our impact fees. It's something that attracts residents here to the city. It's one of our prides and our key items that we can provide as a city. So as we move forward and looking at the options that we have for impact fees, there are 3 of them. The first one is we can update our current formula that we have in our comprehensive plan. And that would increase it to about $8,000 for the park impact fee. That would take it from around $4,100 for a single family home, about $3,800 more. And that's just to give you an idea. And then you also see the multifamily increase up to $5,700, whereas right now it's about $3,000. There's pros and cons on that, and you can look at the screen and read them. And then the second option is status quo. We can maintain our current option now for parks, leave the fee in place as it currently is. What it does is we have pros for that. And then one of the cons is we miss revenues until we update the fee later next year. The third option is to increase the fee based on a rolling the CPIU, which we talked about earlier, which would be 4.42%. That is a safe option to do also. So those 3 options are before the city council. And as you read that slide, I would like to offer any questions before we move forward to traffic impact fees.
Is that slide in our packet?
The slide is not in your packet. It was presented this evening.
We'll provide this to you.
Okay, thank you.
So the same methodology was applied also to the traffic impact fees. You can see here on the comparison where we sit with other cities. Currently, if you compare us to Linwood, we are in the middle of the range. However, when you take a look at what our capital projects are that was adopted in the city's comprehensive plan, we have $242 million of capital projects. Our fee is very low at this time. So as we move forward and looking at our 3 different options for the impact fees, very similar to the parks, what we can do is we can update our fee Currently, right now, based on our capital projects and our projected growth and the TIZs, we can come up with impact fee. What this impact fee, the pros of it is it'd be the most accurate. The cons is that we do have to update our methodology next year in 2025. So we will be coming back regardless with an update to standardize our fee along with creating a multimodal or active transportation fee. The second option, excuse me, is to remain status quo. And that'd be retaining the existing fee. And same with parks. What this does is we do not capture an increase of impact fees, and permits that come in the meantime, we just lose that revenue until we actually update our fees sometime next year. So that brings us to the third option, and that's to increase the current base fee using the rolling CPU, which is 4.42%. This is a safe and conservative option, and this would be in place until we update the fee next year. So the three methodologies are the same for both traffic and for parks. And I would like to open it for questions for City Council. And I do apologize. I was trying to be considerate of your time and whip through that pretty fast.
It is helpful to have that information in advance to be able to look at it and process it instead of like looking at it in real time and then coming up with information. So
yes.
Can you email us copies of those slides to review?
Absolutely.
So next thing, let's just go through school impact fees really quickly and then just a summary. School impact fees.
Hey, Russ, before you start, I'm gonna need a motion to increase the time of the meeting. We got, you say 30 minutes on the executive? 10.
Okay, Karen's got it down to 10. You need 10.
And 10.
And a quick update from you.
And you have one more discussion item, correct,
Right.
about the agenda? Okay,
So how long do we need? What did that add up to?
30 minutes.
Till 8:30? Let's extend the meeting to 8:40. And then that'll give it, if our executive session doesn't go that long, then we can always adjourn early.
Right.
Out of the regular.
There has to be no action taken. Yeah.
Okay, so let's, can I get a motion to extend the meeting to let's go 8:45?
So moved.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, all those in favor, or motion passes. Okay, continue on, Russ.
Okay, so let's just talk about school impact fees really quickly. We have two school districts, Lake Stevens School Districts and Homish School District. Those are pass-through fees. The city really doesn't have a lot of say in those. The school districts set their own fees based on their capital needs. They are adopted into our fee schedule, but we actually don't collect these dollars. They go directly to the school district, and then they just bring us receipts that they have been paid for. And you've seen this information in your last briefing.
Would those fees, Russ, change if the school bond levy had passed?
They would not.
Well, doesn't the school bond levy provide capital facilities? And isn't that what the mitigation fee is for?
The mitigation, and I don't want to get too far into school district fees, but yes, their mitigation fees go to new capital construction. The bond, I believe, goes farther than just capital construction, and it was maintenance, remodel, and new construction, but I don't remember all of the details. But this is the projection they set for every 5 years, and they update it every 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just wanted to return to recommendations. Understand that this was a lot of information for the council. That's why we had, tried to do the briefing back in October and trying to get, all of the pertinent information to you, and we will get this slideshow out. So the first recommendation would be when we return on the 17th with a resolution that City Council adjusts the land use and building permit fees based on this proposed hybrid model for cost recovery that you've seen tonight. Beyond that, we will continue to monitor and check in with council to make sure that those timelines are accurate. And then we would propose to have the fees increase annually based on that 5-year CPIU again, with a major audit every 5 years. But that way our fees will stay current and we won't have to do a large increase, at least for another 5 years. Staff recommends also that the city council adjust the park impact fee based on option 1. The reason behind this is even if you were to look at option 2, which is adjust the park impact fee after the parks fee or the park program is done, the new Parks and Recreation Plan, it's likely all of the capital fees in our current comprehensive plan are going to remain, and you may have additional capital improvements that are added, and those would be based on the depreciation of current assets that will continue to be evaluated. So replacement of playgrounds or other major park facilities going into the next 8 years of that plan. Staff also recommends at this point that the council adopt the traffic impact fee option 3. That would be an interim measure until we can complete our concurrency review and reevaluate the methodology for transportation improvements tied to our new comprehensive plan, and then look at the active transportation. If we look at, that would be an option 2, talking about the active transportation. And if when that work is complete, you would see traffic impact fees for roads and streets go down, and the delta would move to a different fee. And I can't tell you what the total outcome of that fee would be, because it would be population based versus PM peak hour based. So that would be a different calculation. Anyway, those are the 3 options for the different parts of the fees we discussed, and the impact fees and the permit fees with council tonight. We do plan to bring back revisions and a resolution for you in December. And if we could just get some recommendations back from council or what your thoughts are, so we can make any adjustments to this package before we return to you in a week.
I guess whatever the mitigation fees, those are going to be passed on to the consumer. I mean, so whoever is buying the properties, because I mean, the contractor is not paying those fees. Those are just a pass along charge. And so that's going to impact the affordability of the housing. So I did have a question about the director fees. I saw it was $210 an hour. And if we assume the director is making $200,000 a year and, the salary and 2,000 hours a year, that would be roughly $100 an hour. So the rate is $150 an hour. By my calculation would be $300,000 salary, which is 50% higher than what the actual wage is, and that accounts for the $60 an hour, for which would be 40% for benefits, which is still a high number. And so that is something that jumped out at me. I don't know what the other staff's actual wages are. So that help me understand how we arrived at that $210 number.
Sure. Christy, do you have that chart available? But it has three portions of it, which would be salary, benefits, and then that operating cost added on to that.
I do have that. Let me pull it up here. And it is comprised, it was received from finance. We had a breakdown from all review staff for the land use fee, which is, I believe there's over 10 or 12 different employees who, for the staff fee, and then the director fee, it's comprised of the directors, obviously, and the higher level managers who make decisions on permit reviews. And so that does include medical, as you did note. And let me pull it up here. Breakdown. Let me find the breakdown we received from finance. One moment.
So
while
the
you're
short
fi-
answer is that these are the numbers that were provided to us from the finance department, looking at our salaries and benefits. And probably the piece you're missing is the 40% O&M inflation cost, inflator.
I guess I'm not understanding how the inflation is baked into that. So,
That would be the
because it looks
indirect-
like
so
there was
the
already baked in the
direct cost.
Say again.
That would be, so the direct cost is salary and benefit plus the indirect cost that's rolls into that, the admin cost.
You mean the 40% indirect fees?
Yeah.
Because I saw that in there said, if applicable is what I saw on the spreadsheet. So I guess you're assuming that that's automatically applicable.
I can share my screen. I have it right here, what we received from finance. Let me see if I can rejoin the meeting here. Hold on.
And while you're finding out, I do support the tech fee representing the cost of the software we're using. So why we're not doing that, I would support the tech fee adequately representing that. So we're not incurring, a cost that's unnecessary.
Oh, okay. Here you go. Here's what we received. And Barb, I believe this is from Matthew, not yourself. So if it doesn't look familiar to you, that's probably why. And so here we go. Here is the chart that we have. And as you can see, it's based on the pay grade internal billable rate. And then we have others who are LOF, non-LOF, and then we have a 15% profit for billable rate. And I don't know if Barb, you can explain that. And we have an average cost and then plus 25% for.
It would be the ones to the right would be the inflator.
And that was used and it was rounded up. The cost came out to 208 and it was rounded up to 2010, or excuse me, 210. Then we have a similar breakdown for review permit staff. Our rate is lower and it rounded up to 120. And if you have any further questions or any additional clarification, we'd be happy to provide that to you.
Yeah, I just ask these questions because when I get asked the questions, I want to be able to respond intelligently. And right now, like if someone asks me, are you paying your director $300,000 a year?
Sure.
And so based on that, because they're saying, the wage plus 40%. And so, I want to be able to answer that question, with reasonable level of intelligence.
Yes.
And right now, I don't feel like I can do that. So, but thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Other questions, comments from the council tonight for any modifications we can bring back to you?
We just emailed you that presentation, so you've got it in your boxes.
So I do have a question. To what extent can AI be used in this process?
Well, that's yet to be determined. I don't want to get too far off, but as the mayor mentioned, one of the first things we're going to do is do an internal audit of each department to determine what tasks can go to AI. In the case of our department, it's really search engine type stuff. It's website directories. How do we get information to our customers rather than doing some of the work? But there are opportunities for us to automate things like doing postcards. Actually, the time spent doing the postcard, but there's still the cost of the mailing and the production. So we'll have to see where that plays in the future, but we will try to identify how it can help our department.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, if I could add something to that point, we have been working, Carol has been working with Bitco or for our permit system. We've been working over the past year to automate reports and comment review letters to our applicants. We've recently rolled this out. I think it was starting in August, and we are continuing to do that because what we find is we have a higher level of accuracy of comments through our permit system. So what it does, it takes fire comment, schools comment, it directly puts them in an auto formatted form, and that can just be PDF'd directly to the applicant and uploaded to the permit. So it's not AI. However, it is a way to automate and make efficient, expedient use of time and staff time and savings.
Thank you.
Anything else, Russ? No, so we'll bring back a resolution, and without further comment, and we'll see where that goes. All right, great. I'm going to move us along. Kelly, you have the floor.
Okay, real quick. Next meeting is December 17th. It would be a workshop normally, but we're going to make it a special meeting. It will be the last meeting of the year. We won't meet again until January 7th. So you've got a 3-week break after next Tuesday, unless we have to or something urgent comes up. But wanted to run through the items real quick for the December 17th meeting. As Russ mentioned, we'll bring back this fee resolution. We'll have some board and commission reappointments. A 24-25 capital project and TBP update from Aaron. Legislative priorities update from Trevor Justin, our lobbyist. So looking for approval of those priorities. Shannon is bringing in a couple agreements, one with the Snohomish Conservation District, and another stormwater cost sharing agreement with Costco. Main Street Construction Management Contract. On consent, we'll have the Main Street Roundabout Phase 2 design contract as well on consent. We may have a couple more employee introductions. And then Russ, I believe, is bringing Civic Center contracts. So that's what I've got as of today.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move into an executive session. Kelly, can you give us the scoop on that?
So yeah, discussion of property acquisition and potential litigation or litigation per RCW 4230. Well, we need 30 minutes, so we said we'd end at 8:45 unless we end earlier. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Oh.
you know, something like that, or even a Country Dawn, as big as Country Dawn is. I didn't do it. I didn't get into it to do that. I wanted.
Okay, we are live back into our city council meeting. There's no action to follow after executive session. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Motion's passed and have a great evening.